Plugged In. I'm Greta Van Susteren, and each week at this time, Plugged In will focus on an aspect of U.S. policy, questioning those who make and shape policy, and you're going to hear various opinions about that policy. And by being plugged in, you will have an opportunity to speak up and get involved. We are live on Facebook at Voice of America, and we want your comments and questions. And as the curtain is raised on the Winter Olympic Games in South Korea, we look at the very tense situation between North Korea and the United States, and of course its impact on the region, and of course all around the world. Ahead, you will hear from U.S. Vice President Mike Pence, National Security Advisor General H.R. McMaster, and Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley. But first, VOA's Bureau Chief in Seoul, Brian Padden, reports on the decision to include North Korea at the Olympics and the impact that decision has on the tense global standoff.
At the Pyeongchang Olympics, North and South Korea will march together under a special unified flag during the opening ceremonies. They will also field a unified women's ice hockey team. An all-female North Korean cheering squad known as its Army of Beauties will be on hand to support athletes from both countries, and the North Korean Samjeon Band Orchestra and other artists will perform in both the Pyeongchang region and Seoul. For South Korean President Moon Jae-in, this inter-Korean Olympic cooperation is part of a broader diplomatic initiative to peacefully resolve the North Korean nuclear standoff.
We have to lead North Korea into a dialogue of denuclearization as well, which will also improve inter-Korean relationships.
However, in South Korea, there is increasing opposition to Moon's Olympic engagement that conservatives see as unilateral concessions to the repressive North. The U.S. also views the North's Olympic cooperation as an attempt to improve its threatening image and weaken international support for tough international sanctions.
I think this is a distraction. I think this is doing what North Korea has always done, which is when things get hot, start talking.
U.S. President Donald Trump has pushed for a maximum pressure policy emphasizing tougher economic sanctions and possible military action to stop the North from developing long-range nuclear missiles that can target the U.S. mainland. But North Korean leader Kim Jong-un remains unwilling to even talk about halting his country's nuclear program. To underscore its defiant stance, North Korea is expected to hold a massive military parade on the day before the Olympics opening ceremony that may show off the long-range missiles it has been testing. President Trump was non-committal when recently asked about the prospects for peace after the Olympics.
We're going to find out how it goes, but we think the Olympics will go very nicely, and after that, who knows? We'll find out. We're going to find out pretty soon, I suspect.
The U.S. and South Korea have suspended joint military exercises for the Olympics, but indicated they would resume soon after the Games, despite a North Korean demand to further suspend the drills to support improving inter-Korean relations. And there is increasing talk in Washington about launching a bloody-nose limited military strike in response to the next North Korean provocation, despite the risk it could spark a deadly conflict in the region. Brian Padden, VOA News, Seoul.
Now, for President Trump, a bloody nose or preemptive strike on North Korea is reported to be among the many options under consideration. And last week, in his first State of the Union speech, Trump highlighted North Korea's human rights abuses, inviting North Korea defector Ji Song-ho to the First Lady's box. While collecting coal to feed his family, Ji had passed out and woke to find a train had run over his limbs. He then used a pair of wooden crutches to flee to China and then on to South Korea. Now fitted with artificial limbs, Ji kept his crutches as a symbol of his journey to freedom. We caught up with Ji on Friday.
The North Korean leadership has lied too much to its people. When the Kim Jong-un regime first came to power in late 2011, it promised to solve basic needs in 5 years. 5 years passed since then, but the situation in North Korea has gotten even worse. When North Korea conducted its nuclear test last year, its people had to work hard because Kim Jong-un said their basic needs would be fulfilled after the test. But Kim Jong-un had changed his words a week after he conducted a nuclear test. So people were talking about how could there be a second, third march of hardship with sanctions in full swing? Who would be able to believe such a leader? Those kind of lies will only work once or twice. His grandfather, his father lied. Now a young leader in power is lying. A lot of North Koreans are frustrated now. North Korea sanctions are in full swing right now, and I believe the effects are kicking in within the regime now. For example, fishers who used to earn foreign currency by selling fish to Chinese vessels before cannot do that anymore. Prices are soaring in markets, and people are blaming Kim Jong-un for doing bad politics. DVDs are going into North Korea, and brainwashing its people is not working anymore. North Koreans do not want to hear they are starving because of the United States. They do not want to hear they should kill Americans. What they want now is freedom, the regime leaving them alone and not being monitored. The North Korean regime is taken aback by its people's responses. I think the Kim Jong-un regime will become very unstable if it does not take care of people's basic needs. I believe the Kim Jong-un regime is aware of this as well. North Koreans nowadays are different from before. There is a saying in North Korea that only the cunning, smart, and quick ones have survived. The people who acted like naive rabbits and deer have all starved to death. The quick ones have escaped from North Korea, and people say they have to be like foxes in order to survive.
Now, over the past 6 weeks, I interviewed key members of the Trump administration about this growing crisis with North Korea. I asked U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, about the symbolism of North Korea and South Korea walking together under one flag at the Olympics.
I think it's good that North Korea and South Korea are talking, but we shouldn't be misled by the fact that just because they've had talks about the Olympics and this is going to happen, that that's going to take away the dangerous side of North Korea. Until they actually stop the ballistic missile testing, until they actually show that they are willing to denuclearize, we have to be very careful. They've done these talks before. That's what stalled it for all these years. We have to make sure that they're about action, and that action is to completely stop all the nuclear activity that they're doing.
Well, apparently it's even going a little further that there's going to be a hockey team jointly between North Korea and South Korea.
I think that's fine. I think if they want to do that, that's fine. But it doesn't stop the international pressure from everyone that is telling North Korea to stop. So, you know, they can go and have those regional cooperation on that level, but at the end of the day, we still have nuclear missiles in North Korea that they continue to test and they continue to threaten the United States and the world with. And so we're going to keep that at the forefront.
Do you think that this is sort of a divide and conquer, and this is sort of some motive behind Kim Jong-un, that it's not just that he has an interest in the Olympics and sort of unification of the peninsula, that there is some sort of message to the U.S.?
Look, just because North and South Korea are holding hands today doesn't mean that that threat has gone away. The United States and the international community is going to keep up the pressure on North Korea to totally disband. Until that time, we're going to wait and make sure there's no activity, no testing. But when that time comes, we will decide at that point. But all the cards are actually in North Korea's hands on how we respond. So if they do the right thing, we're happy to work with them. If they don't, we've got options on the table.
Is China helping to ease the tensions with North Korea? We hear more from Ambassador Nikki Haley, along with National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster and Vice President Mike Pence when we come back. Stay plugged in.
I'm Jim Malone, and I work the political beat. I cover what drives the political issues in the United States, what voters think, what drives the candidates, how public opinion shifts on one issue or another. It keeps you in touch with the American people and where they want the country to go. It's a great way to get a window on what's happening in the United States. I'm Jim Malone, and my beat is U.S. politics.
I'm Jeff Selden, and I work the National Security Beat. National Security Beat is anything that affects the national security of the United States, from counterterrorism to surveillance to even relations with Russia. It's one of the most fascinating beats you can have. It's probably one of the more important beats that you can cover because it touches on so many areas of the world, so many areas of people's day-to-day lives. I'm Jeff Selden, and my beat is National Security.
I started working at VOA in 1998. We're originally from former Yugoslavia, so we moved to America right when the war started. In 91, when I came here, in class I would always spend a lot of time doodling. With wall art, graffiti, it opened up the door to exploration for a teenager. But you can definitely come out and do a piece like this or do a piece like this, and it would be recognized. And you also tell a story through it. I connect art with journalism because it's a story that changes. And it's not just a view, it's not just a personal perspective, it's a story. And it's a story to be told. And that's it.
Welcome back to Plugged In. I'm Greta Van Susteren, and this is Plugged In. On his way to represent the United States at the Olympics in South Korea, Vice President Mike Pence and the U.S. plans to unveil the toughest and most aggressive sanctions against North Korea to stop its nuclear and ballistic missile program. And in my interviews with Pence, National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, and UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, I asked them about economic sanctions and China's role.
North Korea would not be doing this ballistic missile testing if they didn't have the money to do it. They're not using revenue to feed their people. They're using the revenue to build the weapons to do these tests. And so what we said was we've got to cut off the revenue stream. And so now you see 90% of the trade's been cut off.
China recognizes that the situation has changed fundamentally. And China recognizes three fundamental shifts in their own thinking and three fundamental shifts in what we all have to do together. The first shift is that denuclearization of the peninsula is the only acceptable answer. It used to be that you hear a lot of talk about freeze for freeze or suspension for suspension. There's a recognition that that's no good anymore because their programs have progressed too far. The second thing is China recognizes that this is a problem really between North Korea and the whole world, including a problem between North Korea and China. There used to be old talk about, well, this is really a problem between the United States and North Korea. China recognizes that it is in China's interest to denuclearize the peninsula, and that's because of the threat of a breakdown in the non-proliferation regime. What if South Korea, what if Japan conclude that they have to arm in similar ways to North Korea? And the third thing is that China recognizes that it really does have the coercive economic power to resolve this situation. And it'll be up to China when and if they make those decisions. As you know, the UN Security Council has come up with more and more restrictions on North Korea, more and more sanctions against North Korea. Those have to be rigorously enforced. But we also have to acknowledge that's not going to be enough. And I think you're right about this. I mean, North Korea, unless more pressure is applied, will not conclude that it's in its interest to denuclearize.
You know, it's interesting that I don't think, I've been to North Korea 3 times. I don't have a sense, and it's just, you know, it's a random sampling. It's in no way any scientific study. I don't have any sense that the people of North Korea themselves don't think that they have the best place on earth to live, except for those who maybe get some sort of information from the West. But I think that's the problem too, is that there's a potent, the people aren't with us. You know, the people are not against their leadership, at least not right now.
Well, it's been 3 generations now of leadership who systematically brainwash their own population, who deny them access to outside information. Once information can penetrate that society, I mean, this is what he probably fears the most, right? I mean, so there are some who argue what we really need to do is open the gates to this misunderstood regime in the North. Of course, that's one of the things that the North fears the most because it will expose all the lies. It will expose all of the hypocrisy.
All right, one last question on this. If the economic sanctions don't work for whatever reason, either they don't respond to them, or China doesn't stiffen them, or the North Koreans can cheat around them. If those sanctions don't work, then what? And what's our timetable?
Well, what we have to do is prepare for a broad range of options for the president, and those include military options, and we've made no secret about that, and we'll work closely with our allies as we develop and refine those options. And essentially, if we have to compel the denuclearization of North Korea without the cooperation of that regime, we'll bring those options and our assessment of risks and consequences to the president for decision.
The president has tweeted that he has a bigger button than Kim Jong-un. Is he playing with fire with Kim Jong-un and sort of tweeting, having this Twitter war with him back and forth?
President Trump has provided the kind of clear leadership on the world stage that's made measurable progress, particularly with regard to North Korea. And the message the president sent in the wake of Kim Jong-un's New Year's message, where while on the one hand he talked about wanting to reach out to his neighbors to the south, at the same moment he spoke of having missiles that could reach the United States and having a button on his desk. President Trump made it clear America will not be bullied, America will not be threatened, and that the United States of America has, by being clear, managed to marshal an unprecedented amount of economic and diplomatic pressure on North Korea. And after decades of North Korea stalling and ignoring the world community and continuing to develop nuclear and ballistic missiles, we're now literally beginning to see some movement among nations in the region.
With plans for the toughest and most aggressive economic sanctions, along with possible military action on the table, what should the United States do? What can it do? And what might work? Two experts on North Korea join me when we come back.
I'm Jim Malone, and I work the political beat. I cover what drives the political issues in the United States, what voters think, what drives the candidates, how public opinion shifts on one issue or another. It keeps you in touch with the American people and where they want the country to go. It's a great way to get a window on what's happening in the United States. I'm Jim Malone, and my beat is U.S. politics.
My name's Carla Babb, and I work the Pentagon beat. That access helps me to do better stories. Every day it's my responsibility to collect all of the defense news. It keeps our VOA viewers informed. I get to travel all across the globe. Anything that's defense related and how to protect and keep people safe, that's where I'll go. So it's never a dull moment at the Pentagon. My name is Carla Babb. This is my beat.
I'm Roger Muntu. I've been a VOA for about 4 years. First of all, I wanted to become a broadcaster. That was the idea. But my parents, where I was growing up in the DRC, thought that that was not a good idea because it was not a well-paid job. When I came to the US, I was like, you know what? Now I'm living here on my own, so I can do whatever I want. The only way for me to get to broadcasting is to start by building my own studio. I loved music since I was a kid. Creating my own stuff is like building your own house. I did some acting in high school. So my acting came back and they started calling me to audition me, which I went and auditioned. They're like, oh my God, you're an actor. At VOA, I do radio, but I also do TV. We deal with social issues. We debate a subject every week. People in different countries in Africa can call and express their opinion. VOA really humbles me. It gives me a sense of understanding the world in that one building. You can't get that anywhere.
Thank you for staying plugged in. And now I have two guests here to discuss U.S. policy towards North Korea. Sumi Terry is a former CIA analyst who is now a senior fellow and Korea chair at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Scott Schneider is director of the program on U.S.-Korea policy at the Council on Foreign Relations. He's also the author of the book South Korea at the Crossroads. Thank you both for coming and joining me. Let me go first to you, Sumi. The news says that Vice President Pence, who's in Japan, says now that the U.S. is going to impose, and I assume the world, the toughest and most aggressive economic sanctions ever against North Korea. Haven't we been doing that, and what more can we do?
I think there's still plenty more we can do. And I think he's just trying to really show that we are going to stay on this very maximum pressure policy, regardless of North Korea's Olympic outreach to South Korea. We don't want North Korea to hijack this narrative, and we're just going to stay on course. We are, tough sanctions are in place, but there's still plenty more we can do, and particularly going after maybe more Chinese and Russian and other third-party entities that do illicit business with North Korea. There's more to do on the secondary boycott arena.
Scott, one of the guests, General McMaster, talked about how it's so much in the interest of China that the peninsula be denuclearized. Yet, why hasn't China stepped up harder before now?
I think China is concerned about the unintended consequences of pressure on North Korea in terms of generating instability in North Korea. And so that has kept them from being willing to go as far as we would like to see them go. And so increasingly, I think what the U.S. is doing is essentially telling the Chinese, this is the way it's got to be. We have a near and present danger, and China is going to have to fill that gap.
And do you think President Xi is now agreeing with that, and that they also have plans to step it up?
I think we have some evidence that they are doing better, but I still have doubts about whether they're going to go all the way.
All right, well, we're sort of racing against the timeline, though, Sumi, is that while we've been increasing gradually the sanctions, and this has been going on for decades, is the nuclear program in North Korea has been advancing at a rapid pace. They've tested an ICBM missile last summer, and of course they've had the hydrogen bomb in the fall. So, I mean, how much time do we have?
Not a whole lot. You saw the CIA Director Mike Pompeo say maybe within a couple of months. Now, I think that's a little bit too short of an assessment in terms of timeline, but it is true that North Korea is about 95% done with the nuclear program. They have one major technical hurdle they have to cross, which is to show successful reentry capability, but they're very close. Maybe within a year. We don't have a whole lot of time if the goal still is denuclearization of North Korea.
All right, Vice President Pence may, at least it's sort of on the table, Scott, is that he may meet with someone from North Korea while he's at the Olympics. We don't know for sure whether that happened, but your thoughts on that?
Well, any kind of crisis communication channel that can be established between the U.S. and DPRK is, I think, a positive thing. After all, we know that during the Cuban Missile Crisis, there was communication between the leader of the Soviet Union and the President of the United States. We don't have that in this crisis, and so there are risks associated with the absence of communication at the top levels.
Sumi, how do you think it's going to be viewed? Vice President, one of his guests at the ceremony is going to be Otto Warmbier's father, Otto Warmbier, the college student who died in custody. He was returned to the United States in a coma after 15 months in prison, but for all intents and purposes died in North Korea. How do you think that will be received by the North Koreans when they know that Otto Warmbier's father's there?
Well, they already know. I'm sure it's received very badly. I'm sure Kim Jong-un is very unhappy about that. But again, I think that's because we, the United States, want to make sure that North Korea does not hijack this whole Olympics. They're trying to do the whole image makeover as if all the provocations of last year didn't occur, that they didn't test the hydrogen bomb. We're trying to say, look, North Korean regime is still, there's a brutal regime, and we want to highlight that by bringing Otto's father. I'm sure Kim Jong-un is very unhappy about it.
Scott, there's all the attention on the nuclear weapons program, and of course the question is divided into two parts. Whether our attention is on North Korea getting a nuclear weapon, one that they can actually deliver, and deliver, of course, the United States. The other is whether they're going to essentially becoming the Walmart of nuclear bomb technology and spread it around the world to other rogue nations. But I don't hear any attention on the possibility of biological or chemical weapons. And we know that Kim Jong-nam, the brother of Kim Jong-un, that he was killed in a foreign airport with a biological agent. So are we not worried about those programs, or don't they exist?
We absolutely have to be worried about those programs. The chemical weapons attack using VX agent on Kim Jong-nam shows that North Korea is willing to look at those unconventional channels.
Why don't we hear much about that? I mean, we hear so much in the news about the nuclear program.
I think the nuclear program has just become such a dominant issue, but I think that there are people in the think tank community, certainly, who are focused on this issue, and it's certainly something that the U.S. forces Korea have to prepare for as they think about the possibility of military conflict with North Korea.
The intelligence community is very focused on it. We know that North Korea has a very substantive chemical and biological weapons program. And in fact, if there is any kind of a limited military strike on North Korea, one of the retaliation could be chemical weapons, using chemical weapons in Japan or South Korea. It's not only a missile or a nuclear front, but you're absolutely right. It's a very serious concern and threat.
How much information do we really have going on in North Korea? I mean, it seems like we're all sort of guessing along the sidelines because it's been a cloistered, hermetically sealed nation. I mean, do we really have good intelligence?
Well, in the intelligence community, we call North Korea hardest of hard targets, and that's for a good reason. And what's particularly hard to get at is regime intentions. There's capabilities, there's intentions, there's resolve. How do we know what Kim Jong-un is really thinking, what's his intention, and what's his resolve? That's really hard to get at, and because we cannot really run we can run spies in North Korea. I mean, it's very hard to do, right? It's one of the most closed society in the whole world.
Scott, do you anticipate that this is going to end up in a nuclear action of some sort? I mean, bloody noses seems like just one strategic strike that the president has threatened, but is this going to get worse?
Right now, we're still on a trajectory toward it getting worse. I don't think the Olympics has reduced the danger of both sides being on a trajectory towards some kind of military confrontation. It doesn't have to go nuclear, but the costs will be catastrophic if it occurs.
What's your predictions?
I do think that we have a little bit of a thaw, and it's going to take us until March 18th, right? That's when the joint military exercises, we have suspended it till end of the Paralympics. But again, at end of March, early April, when we resume joint military exercises, I think the tension will be back where we were last year.
Representing the North Koreans is going to be Kim Jong-un's sister, which is a big, I mean, she's an important person. Why isn't he going?
Well, it's probably premature to see him go. Kim Yo-jong is on the sanctions list, and so there's an interesting questions about
well, she
whether...
She can't travel either.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
She's not supposed to travel according to the UN sanctions.
To make an exception.
But I think that it makes sense for the leader to have some kind of face or emissary as an initial communications channel. And the real question is whether the North Koreans intend to use this solely for propaganda purposes, or whether or not we can find some kind of opening to extend the discussion with a leadership that really has not been talking with anybody, any other leaders in the world.
We have 30 seconds left. Who do you think the U.S. would rather be dealing with, Kim Jong-un or his father?
His father, 100% Kim Jong-il. There was a certain predictability to Kim Jong-il. I mean, I thought I would never say this, but Kim Jong-un turned out to be more brutal, more ruthless, and I mean, he conducted 90 missile tests and 4 nuclear tests in 6.5 years, or a little bit over 6 years.
You agree, Scott?
No, that's right. There was a predictability and a pattern to Kim Jong-il that we have not yet been able to find with Kim Jong-un.
And of course, we don't even see him much. We don't know much about him. He's the mystery, and we have this blackout there.
That's right. No channels.
It's just incredible. Anyway, thank you both. We're going to have to leave it right here. I'd like to thank my guests, Sumi Terry from the Center for Strategic and International Studies and Scott Schneider from the Council on Foreign Relations. Now, before we go, a reminder that there are 3 Americans being detained in North Korea right now. The family of one of them, Tony Kim, has taken to YouTube to appeal for help getting him released. There has been no contact with him or any of the other Americans since last June. His son is using the hashtag USA3 to try to raise awareness through social media. You can find the video on YouTube. All you have to do is search for Free USA3. That's all the time we have for today. Stay plugged in by liking us on Facebook at Voice of America. You can also like my Facebook page at facebook.com/Greta. And of course, follow me at Twitter, @Greta. Thank you for being plugged in.